Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Matthew Hardman. I am the CTO for the Microsoft Asia Pacific Partner Team. It is my extreme pleasure to actually be here virtually with you. I wish that we could actually do this from a much more physical presence point of view, but as we all understand and know, the COVID situation, I guess you could call it, has certainly made our lives a little bit different in terms of the way we actually work, and not just in terms of our profession, but also that of our families. In the background behind me, you can't probably see because I've blurred my screen, but my son is actually doing home-based tutoring at the moment. He's doing his science work. During the day, they're doing their schoolwork through webcams and things like that. A lot of them using Zoom, but much to my angst. But what do you do about that? But it's an interesting world we're living in, and I think this sort of situation has really gone ahead and actually accelerated what's been happening in terms of technological change. And I wanted to take the opportunity to share with you some of the thoughts I actually have around that and what we're actually seeing. I've spent some time talking to a lot of different people who are have roles as CIOs, as chief digital officers. Talk to people on the field who are running IT environments. I talked to my wife. She actually runs the help desk for Asia Pacific for a large financial company, and I have the luck to actually listen to some of the conversations that she's having as well. So it really is an interesting situation that we're actually into. So let me jump into the presentation, and then hopefully, if we have time, we might get questions. I'm not too sure. We'll see how we go. Now, this is probably a very common thing that you're probably seeing in most people. Well, maybe not the meeting room, but this is one of Microsoft's meeting rooms. And we held a meeting the other day, and this was the room we actually booked, and these were the people who were actually in the room themselves. No one. Right, everything was actually done via Teams. It was done remotely. You're experiencing the same thing right now using this Teams live event. But this is the situation that we're having right now. No one really is in the office except sort of essential services and essential workers. But this view of the office is starting to become the norm. And to get to this point has certainly not been one that has been a smooth journey. There's lots of organizations who have been thinking about this for a long time in terms of how do we start to let people work from home? How do we allow this extreme form of mobility of extending our office? And it was successful in some areas, maybe with certain individuals in their in certain roles, maybe the executives and things like that, but it wasn't scaled out on a large point of view, right? In fact, most of the world that we saw traditionally was very much still desk-bound users. They may have been using laptops, they may have been using a whole range of different devices, but the people who were truly mobile users who could effectively pick up their work and work from anywhere was a rarity, right? If you think about the offices that you may have worked in, and I say have because that's an interesting conversation as well, but many of those people have specific set desks, right? They have their equipment all set up there. They have everything the way they want it, and their IT equipment is actually sat inside that environment. And when they go home, that laptop may very well be left on the desk, or as a matter of fact, people might pick that laptop up and go home, put it in their bag, and that's where it stays. And afterwards, they finish. They start next day. They bring the laptop back up and they plug it back into the firewall. And they weren't really required to be effective when they were at home, right? Most people would probably go home and essentially do email or browse the web or maybe work on that PowerPoint document, which wasn't really a sort of a work process which required or necessitated large amounts of security or large amounts of services to be able to go ahead and make that to work. Everything kind of ran on the PC and leveraged, your home Wi-Fi. But now there's a situation we actually see is that this traditional sense of IT has completely changed, because it's not just the IT itself, it's the services that are rendered around IT that has to go ahead and actually change. So we've gone from, the set of a few people who are truly mobile, who are a little bit more difficult to go ahead and actually serve because of their mobility, but the majority of our teams actually being inside the office, and so you can standardize your approach, to a situation where almost every user has actually become mobile, right? In fact, even the people who serve these people who are mobile are also having to become mobile, right? And so I give you an extreme example, not extreme example, but a real example. My wife, as I said, she works for the help desk for a large financial company, and so she supports a group of around about, I think last check was about 100 hardcore investors. Now, at the moment, she actually has a desk here behind me in our little study here, and she is having to support those 100 users from home, which means she has to have access to all of these different systems to be able to go ahead and do that. But bear in mind, the help desk support service is a support service which can be very hands-on. And so they are now having to think about, how do you support the logistical elements of IT in this new world, right? How do you ensure that when you need to be able to go ahead and actually get someone's laptop fixed, how do you do that? In the past, that person would come to them and give them the laptop and say, hey, this is not working, can you fix it for me? And they would go ahead and actually fix the laptop, and then they would walk it back over to the person's desk. But now, how do you do that? You can't physically go to someone's house. One, that's a safety issue, but two, I mean, you're being told by the government you can't go ahead and actually interact with people outside of your home right now, right? So now you have to involve in logistical people, and they also have to make sure that those logistical people are authorized to be able to go ahead and handle the data, because the data they have is so much more critical to that business environment. It gives them a competitive advantage. So all of a sudden, this entire scope of how IT works, it's not just the technology, it's the processes behind it that have to change. It's the way people interact has to change. It's the way that users themselves have to think about how they will be serviced in the future. That has to change as well. And so more and more of those applications, more and more of those services that support all those different things are going to have to be more accessible to people out there in the world today, right? So we're going to see more of those applications going outside of the corporate firewall as such. And what I think you're going to start to see, and I'm sure you're probably seeing this as well, is that there's a focus to try and work out, well, now we've been forced to essentially have our users less in the office. What things can we go ahead and actually push towards maybe a cloud service, so we don't have to worry about the day-to-day maintaining of that environment? We can go ahead and actually make sure that the services and the systems are running satisfactorily to ensure that there's a certain service level being delivered to all of our users. But it certainly is a very complicated world that we actually go ahead and actually live in today, right? There's a whole range of different challenges that we need to go ahead and actually work within. And so as we think about all of these mobile users and what's actually going on inside their environments, we start to realize that the users themselves, they really are going to change the way that IT is actually happening. They're going to change the way that IT is accelerating to support them. In fact, the way that I sort of think about this, and it's something that Microsoft's talked about before, but it has really become true in the last couple of months, is that, you know, every single person themselves has now become, or must become, the intelligent edge, right? They are the edge of what actually goes on. You know, sometimes we talk about edge computing from the point of view that I might distribute computing out towards a manufacturing plant or some devices and try and aggregate some of the computing resources there. But I mean, the user is probably the most extreme form of intelligent edge computing that you actually have, right? Their usage of compute power varies significantly, right? There's no real standard approach. I mean, every time we sort of talk about people having a standard operating environment, even the way they use that technology does change, right? It effectively changes on the way people build their business processes, the way they build their flows, the way they go ahead and actually do things. And so this has become a fairly complicated environment that we go ahead and live in. You start thinking about the delivery of applications and how those applications should work. They're very, very challenged. And in order for us to be able to actually make this as successful as possible, we need to ensure that the intelligent edge is also backed up with, you know, the intelligent cloud, right? And, Yeah, sure. I call out Azure here, and this is a cloud sort of conference. There are other cloud services out there as well, but from a Microsoft point of view, Azure really becomes the world's computer. It's that unifying platform that helps to bring all of these applications together, right? So it's not talking about Office and things like that, but it's talking about the underlying services that will allow us to build those next generational applications that effectively people can use to go ahead and solve these problems, right? So if we start to think about the combination of what we can go ahead and actually do inside Azure with the combination of what we can go ahead and actually deliver with the edge, it starts to become pretty compelling, right? Already we see people coming together from an edge computing and a centralized compute processor to go ahead and actually try and solve COVID data, right? So everyone's using a lot of their spare computing power to go ahead and actually solve that. Now, that's a space that we've gone ahead and contributed to as well. But that's a great example of where everybody is coming together to try and actually go ahead and actually solve a potential society actual problem. So we have this very real situation now where we are having to unify all of these things together, right? The intelligent edge from the user side, the intelligent cloud from the centralization side of things. But it's very exciting because we're starting to see a huge range of different innovations that are actually happening inside different users' environments, right? We're starting to see the ways that organizations have started to change the way they do things and have started to leverage technology, right? Think about home-based learning right now, right? I still think there's a long way to go, right? I've seen some fantastic examples of home-based learning for schools, right? The fact that people have been able to go ahead and actually continue to do education lessons and things like that. But I think while the technology is rapidly accelerating to actually help enable home-based learning, it's still challenged from the fact that I think some of the people who are delivering the home-based learning are still trying to catch up with what's actually going on. We weren't totally ready to be able to translate our content from schools into a home-based learning scenario. The technology has gotten better, right? I would be great if everybody could go ahead and actually use Teams, but people are going ahead and using technologies like Zoom as well. And Zoom has done the right thing and tried to catch up with the privacy and security and those elements and really help people go ahead and actually use that. We're seeing the same technology being used to connect to people as well from a social point of view, so they don't feel so isolated. So, more than ever before, I think we are all living in terms of this connected world. Now, coming out of this, I want to share with you sort of 3 core areas that I've been thinking about that I think the COVID situation has kind of accelerated, right? And things that I think that will actually go ahead and happen, because as part of my role, I have to constantly think about, okay, what do we need to think that the customer is going to go ahead and actually do before they do it, so we can actually work with partners and help them be ready for some of those shifts. And there's 3 that I've been thinking about, and I want to share those with you because I think they might, well, I hope they will be interesting. They're interesting to me, but it might actually get you to think about some of the new ways that you might think about delivering services or building applications and things like that. So one of the first ones that I think about is this concept of, people's kind of talk about things in the way that, oh, when business gets back to usual, we'll be okay. Or when business gets back to usual, then we'll go ahead and do things the old way. I really don't think that business will actually go back to usual. I think we are living, business unusual forever, right? I think the investments that companies are making today have a much bigger impact, not just in how we're enabling people or how we're enabling them to go ahead and actually do their work, but how that actually enables them to rethink where they spend money in terms of costs for things such as real estate, right? So think about it from this point of view. This is the greatest opportunity or the greatest experiment for an organization to truly go ahead and test their capability of enabling work from home scenarios. Now, why do organizations want to go ahead and enable work from home scenarios? Sure, they want to enable flexibility and things like that, but if you think about the cost of real estate, and especially in a country like Singapore, where real estate is very, very expensive, if I can actually reduce my office space by 50%, but still maintain the same level of productivity, that's a huge cost saving for my organization. That's a huge amount of real estate I don't need to go ahead and actually worry anymore. Maybe I fund some of that investment back into users to be able to set up their own home office and set them up with some sort of home infrastructure to be able to let them be productive. But hey, if I can reduce real estate by 50%, that's an amazing thing. So the fact that all of these different companies have suddenly gone through the rush to enable this remote work from home situation, the fact that they wanted to make people productive, I think this could prove that people can go ahead and actually work from home. I mean, I've been working from home for the last, I'd like to say 4 weeks, I think it is. My wife's actually been working from home for the last 10 weeks. Right, and again, she provides a essential service to all of the investors in the company that she works in. But yes, she's been running the desktop for 10 weeks remotely, and it works out pretty well, right? In fact, she actually enjoys the experience. I think everybody will have their own different personal experience, but she's okay with it. So I think that this is now the way. If any of you have watched The Mandalorian, right? I'm a bit of a geek. The Mandalorians always say, "This is the way. This is the way." Well, this is the way. This is the way that organizations are going to head. Now, I think that does put pressure on IT to be able to do a couple of different things, right? In terms of the rush to be able to enable work from home scenarios, they will need to go back and actually have a look at the security aspects of what's actually going on, right? To make sure that they don't have unintended rogue situations going on from a security angle. So the importance of monitoring security, ensuring that they can go and cool. The other thing that I think we need to think about then as well is also what do we do around personas, right? So the different types of people who are actually working in those companies, right? So not everyone works the same, right? In fact, if we look at the standard information worker as compared to a person who is a data analytics person, or as compared to someone who is a manager, it's very, very different. Take a developer, for example. A developer is a very, very different being altogether, right? I've been there. I've been a developer. And these are to go ahead and deliver technology. And, incremental technologies such as GitHub, developer tools and things like that have helped to actually make them very, very productive. DevOps, the processes have helped to make them very, very productive, but now we're forcing them to sort of work in isolation and try and work out, whoops, I may have lost my screen, did I? So let me just quickly reshare here. I had a bit of a, okay, there we go. I had a bit of a blank there. I'm not sure what happened. But developers are very, very different, right? And so we need to think about how does IT help to enable different types of, that's different. And then finally, the education element of people, that is very, very important. We can't assume that when people work from home, they just know how everything works, right? There is a very focused and a very well thought through education approach. Which I've been thinking about is not just digital transformation, but digital optimization. Let me talk a little bit about that. certainly the COVID situation will force a lot of organizations to rapidly digitize a lot of their business processes, a lot of their documentation, a lot of their data, things like that, trying to turn it as digital as quickly as possible. And many organizations have been on that journey. Find as well, there's going to be some form of rationalization that's going to go ahead and actually happen, right? People will look at that sort of next flow of what do we do with digital, right? Digital is not a straight line. It's not a situation where we say we've gone from paper-based to a digital system and then, hey, great, job's done, right? What I think we're going to see then is a situation where organizations will look at what they actually have and say, can we re-digitize? Can we actually make it better? Like, can I take that business process, which we kind of have wrapped up in Excel spreadsheets, and can I turn that more into an application that maybe runs on someone's phone or someone's iPad a little bit better, right? I see technologies such as Power Apps being a huge innovator to helping to drive these new capabilities, right? If we think about what Power Apps actually does, it really enables you to transfer business processes into a digital environment, into a digital application, and do it with very, very little code itself. Like I went ahead the other day and did a demo of this to build a corporate YouTube application, and I don't think I really wrote any code at all, and yet in about less than an hour, I had built a corporate YouTube application that was running on the phone that actually let me populate data from a Excel spreadsheet and display that on a app. It was amazing. And if the data is correct, they're saying that over the next sort of 5 years, there's going to be 500 million, so 500 million applications or new apps that will actually be built. 450 of those will probably be built by low-code, no-code tools. Now, yeah, as an ex-developer, or if you're a developer in this session, that's certainly not an indication for us to go ahead and actually panic and start thinking that, oh my God, people don't need developers because of low code and no code. I mean, that would be crazy, right? There are many millions of complicated applications and functions that require code. You need to have code. In fact, I think anybody these days should learn to write code as part of their job, right? So they can understand what's going on. And I think what we will actually see is a real refinement of, what are the core applications we can go ahead and actually build using these sorts of tools, right? So I'm excited about how low-code, no-code applications actually brings the business users closer to the developer, and how they might be able to understand each other's world a little bit more and actually start to become much, much more productive. The other part of this, which I find interesting as well, is the deployment of these new applications, right? So typically, we think about deploying an application. It's run as a setup package. It's deployed to the desktop or to the tablet and things like that. But I think there's going to be a rationalization of deployment environments. And I'm pretty excited about Teams. I think right now everybody tends to look at Teams and say, is Teams a competitor to Zoom? Is it a competitor to Google Hangouts? I don't think it's a competitor to any of those things. Yes, it competes in one particular area, which is collaboration and communication, but Teams is a completely amazing technology to really help you to bring together an organization around its business processes, its services, its communication channels. If you can start thinking about how do we build business processes into applications that we can deploy through Teams, it means Teams becomes the target environment to go ahead and actually build those applications. They don't need to look all over the place for where those apps actually exist. It has a little marketplace they can work with. It has a way to deploy those applications. So I think Teams has this opportunity, especially as we start coming out of COVID, where people aren't relying on it just for communication and collaboration. The fact that we can look at it as a way to get applications to people on any device, that's incredibly exciting for me, right? So that focus of not just transformation, but optimization. It's a cyclical wheel that we can work with. And then finally, one of the things which I think about is how tools will influence technology choice. And I used to be, and certainly I know the next speaker very, very well, is a good mate of mine, Walter. We used to work in the developer evangelism teams, right? When I used to work in APAC and Walter was in Malaysia, we used to collaborate all the time in terms of what we were doing with tools and technologies and .NET and all those different things. And I truly believe that while languages and platforms help to influence choice, I think tools can do the same thing as well. And I'm excited about some of the things that we do with VS Code. In fact, I was looking at Stack Overflow and their latest developer surveys. And out of all the possible tools or IDEs that people go ahead and use around the world, VS Code is one of the most popular ones they do. In fact, not just one of, it is the most popular tool that people can use. You can use it on a Mac, you can use it on Windows. You can even go ahead and run it on a Raspberry Pi if you wanted to. It's a bit more difficult to do, but it can be done. But it is a tool which is fantastic to be able to go ahead and actually use. It helps you to bring in all of these different languages, these different frameworks, these different technologies, and helps you to accelerate to build those applications. And I think being able to actually have a tool which makes it easier to use a certain platform or a certain technology, that will actually go ahead and actually influence the choice of that technology. So if I can use it easier, if I can get into it easier through the tool, I may go ahead and actually choose that. And so that's why I'm excited about the ways we can go ahead and plug in not just Microsoft related technologies, but other technologies as well. If we go back to the second point in terms of optimization, and I talk about rationalization, maybe, you know what, there will be some people who will think about saying, hey, maybe do we use open source technology to be able to go ahead and solve a particular business problem? That's fantastic, right? We have great support for open source technologies with Azure. We have great tools to be able to help you go ahead and use that and customize it. But the tools will be important to helping the organizations build those services, those systems to help them truly accelerate out of the COVID situation and really get back into delivering services and support to their customers again. So those are the three things I think about. The world of life going forward, right? Again, not temporary. Unusual is the normal. It's not just about transformation, but about optimization and that continual loop that we go through, right? Innovate, circle back, and then how tools actually make it all happen, right? So those are the three areas, and I'm excited that these sorts of events are able to continue on because this is the community that drives the innovation across these different areas, right? This is the community which is on the forefront of digital transformation, on digital optimization, and the fact that we can actually come together as a community and actually learn and share best practices from each other is only going to help make the world a better place. So, guys, I just want to thank you for the time. I know I've sort of spent half an hour listening to my own voice. I truly wish I could be there in person to speak to you personally and to sit there and share a coffee, have a laugh. But hopefully you've enjoyed this session. Please keep safe, stay at home. Look after your family and have a fantastic conference. Thanks, guys. Take care.